Welcome, everyone, to the Daily Market Wrap. This is the biggest charts in crypto in 30 minutes. Let's jump in to Bitcoin. Now, I just want to preface this by saying the action is in the alts. The action is really not necessarily in Bitcoin right now during the start of this bear market. The action really is in the altcoins. But I want to view the altcoins through the lens of Bitcoin. And so let's just take a moment and let's look on through at Bitcoin. To understand Bitcoin, we have to zoom out to a weekly. So from the weekly, the important level is the 200-week moving average right here and right here. That is the important level. Now, when someone says this time it's different or this time will be different, referring to markets, I just don't think this time is going to be any different. I think this time is going to be exactly the same as last time. And last cycle, Bitcoin dipped below its 200-week moving average by 30%. Let's go ahead and measure that real quick. So right there, that is a 30% dip extension below the 200-week moving average. That's a big dump. Got all the way down to 15K, almost a little bit above 15K. So I don't think that this cycle we're going to see Bitcoin, extend to the downside below its 200-week by 30%. Maybe we see it by 15% because we didn't get that euphoria to the upside. Why should we get, real, fear to the downside? I just don't think that that's likely. So maybe we get a 15% extension to the downside from the 200-week. That would bring Bitcoin all the way down here to 50K. So I think that a bear market trough here for Bitcoin of 50K by October makes sense. So that's really what I'm playing for here, is the continuation of this bear market through the rest of this year into the fall, where we see Bitcoin down here at 50K by the end of September. And it seems likely, especially once you start taking a look at some of these altcoins. So why don't we move on from Bitcoin? Just keep this in the back of your mind. This move in BTC, I'm sure that there will be rallies at some point, but last cycle, once the horizontal support was broken, there really weren't any rallies at all until Bitcoin broke below its 200-week. So, I just don't think that we may not get any rallies until Bitcoin has a 50 handle, has a 5 handle in front of it, 57 maybe, 56. I think that maybe we start to get a rally once Bitcoin breaks its 200-week moving average. So keep that in the back of your mind. Let's start running down the list. We're going to take a look at ETH, Sol, and then we're going to run down all the alts, all of these alts that are just really now starting to get shellacked. But I think that they've got most of them at least 40% more on the downside left to go. Let's go ahead and get started with Ethereum. Now, I live my life off of Ethereum. I really love the Ethereum mainnet and its respective layer twos, a handful of them. But the token itself, ETH, the token, look at what it did last cycle. So take a look at this dump. There was no rally in here. So that move from 2K to $900, at the very start of last bear market to put in the trough, that move took place over the course of about 6 weeks or so, and there was no rally. So I'm thinking to myself, well, this cycle may not be different. And we might see ETH just in a hurry get down to, maybe $1,000. I bet it puts in a higher low this cycle. So if you want to get short, you don't have to use any leverage because, if ETH is trading at 1950, even if you wanted to get short from 1950, like it might sound crazy, saying get short at 1950, but why can't ETH go lower? It absolutely can. It could go much, much lower. It could go all the way down to 1,000. Absolutely. Put in a higher low, a double bottom, and bounce from there. It doesn't need to bounce up to all-time highs. That's just the trough. That's the bear market low. And then ETH might bounce around for a couple of months, and then we get the next bull cycle. But I'm thinking over the next several months, ETH probably makes its way down to $1,000. So we do have this level of trend line support that comes in. And, you could say that maybe ETH is able to find some support down here at like 1,500 or so, maybe 1,600. That could be some short term support. Maybe like during the course of a week, ETH gets down to 1,600, bounces, and then the next weekly candle breaks that trend line support. That could definitely happen. But regardless, I think that we're going to see this same pattern repeat one more time and ETH make its way all the way down to 1,000. So that would be, a great short position to enter even from 1950 because you'd be able to pick up 50% or so on the downside, which means you don't have to use any leverage at all if you're able to hold a short position for a couple of weeks, maybe a couple of months. At that point in time, it just is really important that you track funding or that you track whatever your borrow APY is. So if you're trading perps, you would track your funding rate. If you're, short ETH on a money market, you would track your borrow APY or your net APY. But let's take a look at Solana, one of my highest conviction short plays this bear market. And, look, I'm already making money on this, but I think that I'm going to make a lot more being short SOL for the next couple of weeks, maybe the next like 8-12 weeks, all the way down to $30. I think Solana could even break below 30 and make a move towards like 20 or something like that. And so this would be the region where I would be a buyer of SOL all the way down here, something like this into, like early 2027. So I'm thinking that Solana makes its way first to 30 because this is not support. There's no support here. So the only support is the low that was put in last week, which is at 67.5. So that's the support. Once that breaks, and I think it will break, then I think SOL moves down to 30 in a hurry. It could be just a couple of weeks, maybe like 2 or 3 weeks. And that's what we saw last cycle. So, when this $95 level broke on the downside, well, look at what happened. How many weeks did it take? 1, 2, 3 weeks down to $38. So, that's 21 days. We could see SOL down here with a 30 in front of it, with a 3 in front of it, just a 30 handle on SOL in 3 or 4 weeks. So I am short SOL, one of my highest conviction plays. And again, you don't need any leverage. So this would be a 57% move just down to 30. And that's already at 80. You don't have to worry yourself about, oh man, I wasn't able to sell the highs up here at 150 or at 250. You don't have to even think about that because this is still a 57% move. Like just catch 50% of that move and you do really, really well. So you don't need to be shooting for home runs with every trade. You don't need to be using 3x leverage or 5x leverage or 10x leverage or 20x or 50x leverage. Or for some of you real degens out there, cheers, 100x leverage. You don't need to do that. You can just get short with no leverage and let the market play out. So that's what I'm doing, and it's working. Let's take a look at some really high volatility altcoins right now. So Solana, once you get down past Solana, the volatility starts to get up above 100% consistently. So 100% vol is ridiculous, by the way. Bitcoin is right now sitting at like 60%. ETH is like 75 or 80. Solana is usually around 90 or a little bit higher than that percent vol. And once you get past SOL, the volatility of everything goes up above 100% for the most part when you're talking about altcoins. So all that means is if you're trading an asset with 100% vol, you do not need any leverage at all to be extremely successful. In fact, if you start using leverage, like anything above 1.5x, but that asset has 80% vol, you're going to get in trouble really, really fast. So you don't need the leverage. The leverage is the volatility of the underlying itself. So don't trade with leverage, okay? Or if you're going to, you've got to have a system that works for you. Otherwise, you will get wrecked. It's just a matter of time. So the important levels here for Tau are 170 and 90. So let me just go ahead and mark that support because I think that's where Tau is headed. You see this right here? That is resistance, or was back in 2023 in July. So that was resistance. In fact, let me go ahead and mark that with a horizontal right there. So this is where I would start to consider buying Tau, but really, I think I'll be able to buy Tau for $50. So, that's a move from 150 to 50 of a big whopping 65%. So again, you don't need any leverage. And the reason why I'm so confident in this move is there's no support here. Like this is all breakout. So very little volume here. The volume is down in this green box. So this is going to act as a magnet for price. And it's just going to slice through all of this breakout from back in 2023, the beginning of the bull cycle. So I think it's just going to slice down through it on the way back down and find support down here between 35 and 90, something like that. That seems like the zone where Tau will find some support. And that's where I'll be a buyer because I like the project. The protocol is very interesting. I think that there are a lot of real world things that you can do with the BitTensor Tau layer 1 and all of its subnets. There's real things you can build using those subnets. So there's a use case. I don't know what that use case really is yet, but I think there's a use case outside of just decentralized compute. So I'd be a buyer of Tau and I would buy it spot in a Tau wallet. That's how I would buy it. And you know what? $50 for Tau? Sure. I'll definitely load up some bags down here. But in the meantime, I am short Tau. Let's take a look at SUI. So again, SUI, I would be a buyer of SUI, but it's got to be, at least 40 or 50 cents. I can't buy SUI at 90 cents. I think that it probably moves down at least to 37 cents over the course of the next couple of weeks. And it wouldn't surprise me if SUI actually makes a move lower, if it overshoots to the downside. You might even see, I don't know, 7-cent SUI sounds a little outrageous because that would be a move of 90% even from the current prices today. But it wouldn't surprise me if that happens. I'm thinking maybe like 50 cents, 50-cent SUI. That makes sense to me. And I would be a buyer of SUI at 50 cents simply because I think that there's a future for this protocol. I don't know what its niche use case is going to be, but I think that there is a use case for SUI, for the SUI protocol, for its move programming language for this layer 1. It's very fast. It's very cheap. There's got to be a use case for it, maybe for medical records or something like that. But for right now, I am short and I'll start taking profits around the 40-cent region. On SUI, I'll probably really begin nibbling, taking profits at 55 cents. Here's XRP, one of my favorite shorts, because this breakout, there's no volume here. And so that means that this breakdown could be just straight down over the next 2 or 3 weeks. And that's kind of what I think is likely for XRP. I know that there's an overzealous army of people who have been fooled into thinking XRP is something that it's not. But this is just a straight up meme coin. It's a do nothing chain that's launched a meme coin where they just dump on everyone to fund their treasury, to build stuff that they don't ever ship anything. So Ripple Labs, I think that this probably goes to 30 cents. That's where I think it ends up heading. And, good riddance, because the era of projects that do nothing and siphon value from believers, I think that should end. So maybe 30 cents for XRP. maybe 40 cents. I'll probably start taking profits on XRP once it gets up here to 75 cents. So, once it gets down to 75 cents, that's the top of this zone that I'm targeting here. Once it gets to 75 cents, I'll start taking profits. But the first level that it's going to break is that crash low, from just last week, which, is $1.10. So get below $1.10, and then I think 75 cents comes clearly into view. So I'll start taking profits on XRP at 75 cents. Let's take a look at Arbitrum. Now, I can't quite figure out what the use case is for this layer two, I guess, governance token, but this is definitely a bullish pattern. So this descending wedge, if it ends up touching support, that's where I'll close my short position and actually start buying it. Now, it'll be an easy trade, an easy long, because if it gets down to 2 cents, then it's either, when you buy it, you're either right or you're right out. So you're either right on direction or you exit immediately. So I'll flip the cards around on Arbitrum when it gets down to like 2 or 3 cents, something like that. And that's a massive move. So this is one of the tokens that I think has one of the biggest moves to the downside still left in the tank. So if we take a look at this, that's like down to 2 cents. That's an 80% move. And that makes a lot of sense because, like, what's the purpose of ARB? Who actually holds ARB? Why? Why did they even launch a token? The Arbitrum chain is great. The Arbitrum token, maybe not so much. Here's BNB. So let's check in with the Chinese BNB chain over here. And this big false breakout, this FB, this false breakout, makes me think that maybe BNB will break down below its 200-week moving average and extend to the downside, just like it extended to the upside. That's what we didn't get out of Bitcoin. We never got the extension, which makes me think that we probably won't get the extension to the downside either. But a move all the way down here and a bounce, this move down to 200, that looks pretty interesting to me. And so now that BNB is starting to break down below this level of trend line support here, the next level to watch is $500. Now, BNB is easy because the levels of support and resistance are just the big round numbers for the most part. So right here, $500, if that breaks, I think BNB could go to 200. And so that move from the current price, that's an additional 60% to the downside. And so that would be, in line with what we saw last cycle. But, I'm thinking that maybe a little bit above $200 turns out to be the low for this bear cycle in BNB. I am short BNB. Here is Aave. And, look, Aave is one of my favorite money markets. I wish that it was a little bit more permissionless, but you can do some great things on Aave. It's very safe. It's got a great reputation, but the token doesn't look too hot here. So if we just see this zone, this channel from the cycle, I just threw down some support here from the flash crash lows. And, Aave really got hammered during the flash crash, which tells me that it has thin liquidity. So, that level is 80. That's where the flash crash on October 10th brought us down to, was 80. I think over the next couple of weeks, Aave retests that $80 level. That's why I threw down the horizontal there. But, ultimately, it may move all the way down to the bottom third of this zone of support, maybe around $50 or $60. So that's a move of an additional, 50% or so on the downside over the next couple of weeks, couple of months. So Aave, very useful protocol, but the token, again, maybe not so much. And just take a look at, this has been just straight down, like this pattern straight down, and now the acceleration. So I think we're about to get the parabola down. So sometimes inverting the scale can be useful. So now imagine that you were trading this. What would you think would be most likely if this asset broke out above resistance here? Well, first you would think that it would target this level, but you would also think that it wouldn't hold because there's very little trading volume here. So probably continues to push, and it might even do that quickly, like within 2 or 3 weeks, something like that. So you might think that, hey, the resistance is the all-time high. Well, this is inverted, so this is a low from last bear cycle. So I think Aave probably goes to 45. 45 on Aave seems likely. So, and if you take a look at like total DeFi, so this is, the Ethereum, for the most part, this is Ethereum tokens. The pattern, we got a similar level of support here, and we're getting that breakdown. So the bear market last cycle was all the way down here at 31 billion. We're sitting at 74 or 70 billion right now. So could this get cut in half? Absolutely. And that's what I'm playing for. I think that there's still another 50% left to the downside out of Ethereum altcoins. So let's bring it back on up here to the list. Here's Arrow. Now, Arrow, this is like, if you understand the VE33 mechanics, this is just an incentive token to bootstrap TVL. So this should go down to zero or pretty close to zero because there's no, you don't get anything for holding this thing. You've got to stake it. You've got to go through all this rigmarole and vote or enroll it in an auto voter on Aerodrome. And who wants to do all that? And then again, you're earning 20%, but the token is losing 90%. And it's inflationary. No reason to hold this. And that whole DEX mechanics on Aerodrome, it's, I think, some type of a scam. So, this, I think probably goes down to at least 10 cents, but probably in the single digits. Now, I'm not short Arrow, although I probably should get short Arrow because now that it's breaking down below this level of support, it's got at least 50% on the downside and maybe even more than that. Like if it gets down to, I think should be trading for like a couple cents, maybe like 2 or 3 cents. That would be like 90% left on the downside. So yeah, I think the only thing that's holding this up probably is its partnership with Coinbase. That's probably the only thing that's holding this thing up. And even then, eventually the rug will just get pulled. So I think Arrow looks like one of the best shorts. I don't have this. I need to open a short position in Arrow. I'll do that tonight. So here's AVAX. Now, AVAX, I don't know exactly what it is that this chain does. Like, what does the AVAX chain actually do? Like, are there RWAs there? I keep hearing that there are video games there on the AVAX chain, but like, does anyone actually play them? And why does that accrue value to the AVAX token? Like, if there are games that are like that guns token for Off the Grid, Off the Grid looks like a great game, but why does that mean anything positive for the AVAX token? Obviously, it doesn't. And I've heard that they've got partnerships with like big companies like Amazon or whatever, but again, why does that mean anything for the AVAX token? And so I'm thinking to myself that it probably goes down to like its lows at like $2 or $3, something like that. So that would be a big move to the downside for AVAX. So if we just take a look at this and measure this, if it goes down to its lows from when it was like formed at $3, that's a 65% move. And that seems to be pretty likely because it's breaking down below its bear market lows from last cycle. So, what's the use case for this chain? And why, if you're a holder of AVAX, why do anything that this chain does, how does that accrue value to the token? Why would number go up outside of just pure gambling and speculation? In fact, you might even think that the number should go down for these coins like AVAX over time. And that's what's happened. You got this speculative wave, another couple speculative waves, no alt season here, no alt season here, no alt season here. We never got that euphoria to push things up to $150 again. It never happened. Now it looks like it's going to 3. Will it ever recover? I would bet that it will. I'm not counting out AVAX, not yet, but I'll be a buyer at $3. Let's take a look at some meme coins because most of these are basically memes. Like if if a protocol or governance token doesn't have a clear value accrual mechanism where you understand how the protocol revenues are being accrued to holders of the token, then it's kind of sort of a meme. Like, okay, being able to vote in governance, that's great, but I want cash flows. And if the protocol makes money and I hold the token, I need to earn those cash flows. Otherwise, I'm not going to hold the token. Otherwise, it's a meme. And let's take a look at some real memes. So here's Doge. And Doge, probably goes down at least another 50% from here to test its bear market lows from last cycle. But, this thing should die. Like crypto and DeFi can't be, it can't be the scam chains. Like you can't have scam tokens like this. Like, okay, community is one thing. And I know that people like, I guess, fooling themselves into thinking that holding a token like this makes you part of a community. I don't want to be a community member. I want to make money. And so this is some type of a scam. Unless someone builds on top of the Doge layer one, this should go to zero. So maybe a penny, for Doge this cycle, because if it breaks 5 cents, there's no support. Like this move, if we zoom in and take a look back here in 2021, where it pumped, there's no volume here. This is just like 2 weeks straight up. It flags off and pumps. So this could be broken down through like butter. So maybe I throw down a little horizontal there at a penny. I think that Doge could do something like this. The only challenge is that it's got so many people that hold it. Um, so there would need to be some type of push. One of these exchanges might need to run like a winter mute special over the weekend on Doge to really give it a push down. But let's invert the scale. And on the inverted scale, man, this looks like it's just going to pump, right? Doesn't this look like it's just going to pump if you invert the scale? So I think that 5 cents on Doge is the first stop. And then ultimately, a penny and zero. So let's re-invert so we get the regular scale. How about Fartcoin? I bet Fartcoin goes to zero faster than Doge. So invert the scale. Now, doesn't it look like if this were to break out, that it would go to like 2 cents? Yeah, exactly. That's 80%. You can get short and not use any leverage and still do phenomenally well. So I think Fartcoin is one of the coins that I need to open a position on to the downside, get short Fartcoin. So Arrow and Fartcoin, I'm going to open positions in both of those. SPX. So SPX, has this weird cult following. I don't know why. It's like, who's it made money? Maybe a handful of people who were smart enough to sell on the way up. But this is clear resistance. And this is what you call a trend. So take a look at this. High, lower high, lower high. Low, lower low, lower low. I think it's just a matter of time until this breaks support and moves on down towards a couple of pennies. So this is actually a great short also, but it's got that weird community. So I'm going to stay away from this for the time being, just because maybe it gets some type of crazy relief rally of like 50% at some point. So I'm going to stay away from that one. But it still looks like a great short below 21 cents or even just right now. So let's take a look at Link. Here's Link. And you know what? We've only got 2 minutes left. So rather than looking at Link, let's look at the NASDAQ, because this could be the catalyst that really sets off the final, or the ultimate leg down this bear cycle. So take a look at the similarity of this pattern. So last February, we saw the NASDAQ break support, trendline support, and importantly, if I remove the 200 and throw down the 100, it broke trendline support and also broke moving average support. That started us off on that correction down into April, the tariff tantrum correction. Now, what we've got here is a very similar looking pattern. Double top, breakdown of the 100-day. Double top, break of the 100-day. and getting rejected at resistance. So we've got trendline resistance and the 100-day resistance. If the NASDAQ starts pushing lower, I think we're going to see crypto make another leg down. So I hope that that was valuable for everyone. I really appreciate being able to share this stuff live with you guys. And I do this every day, and it's every day at 7 p.m. Eastern. Go ahead, take a look at us over on YouTube. Take a look at us over on School. We've got a ton of free educational content. I put together what I think is the best educational content for crypto and DeFi in the English language. And I also published a bunch of books. So there are 5 books on Amazon you can take a look at, but all the content on the website and in the School community, that's all free. So take a look at DeFi University on School and at DeFi University on YouTube. Thanks so much for joining the call, and see you guys tomorrow. Have a good one.